I'm just going to say that I'm really not an authority on this. I'm just kind of learning. So if I say anything wrong or offend anyone or like call me out on it, because I'm just learning as well. So I don't want to overstep or say something that I should not be saying. But anyway, so I'll start with a story. I was at work. It was a normal... What? Go back. Why is it doing that? I hit once.
Click it once.
Stop it. Alright, okay. So, I was working, it was a normal day, and the man next in line came up to my register, and I began the normal and obligatory, "Did you find everything alright?" But I didn't get a response. I didn't think much of it. He was just another rude customer who didn't care to make polite conversation. So we just continued the transaction, and we endured the uncomfortable silence and exchanged blank glances. Eventually, I asked for his email address, and finally I got a response. But not a response I was expecting. I was completely caught off guard when he signed what I now know means I'm deaf, and made a quiet attempt at a sound. In that moment, I just felt confused. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to communicate with him. When we started this innovations class, my partner Kelly brought an experience to me of a story of an experience that she had at work, much like mine. She helped a deaf couple check out, and initially, she felt bad. She had the same bad feelings that I had about not being able to communicate with these people. So in those moments, ultimately, we felt confused. We didn't know how to act. We didn't know whether or not we'd come off as rude or whatever. So this experience that she had sparked something in her, and she brought the story to me. And then I shared mine, and we started this project. Our project began with creating a basis of promoting the awareness of deafness and deaf people and the usage of American Sign Language within our school and throughout the community. We tossed up a few ideas and tried a few different things, but our biggest idea was a Snapchat that we made for students, and we posted basic signs for everyone to learn. Now, neither of us are fluent, we're both still learning, but it was a way to publicize basic snaps in a way that students use every day to learn basic signs for really anyone across the community, or even this girl from California that I met uses it. So really, anyone can see these basic signs just to learn a little bit about ASL. So one assignment we had in, There. These are some of the Snapchats we did. So, right there. Okay. One assignment we had was to watch TED Talks for class. And we had to watch a new one every week. I watched one called Navigating Deafness in a Hearing World. It was actually a really good talk, so you should look it up. It's done by a deaf girl, but the title is what struck me. Navigating Deafness in a Hearing World. We do live in a hearing world, don't we? Everything in our lives is influenced by our ability to hear. Take, for example, the smallest, most seemingly insignificant thing, like a doorbell or a school bell. Everything in our lives revolves around hearing. And there's such a disconnect between deaf and hard of hearing communities and the hearing communities because of this. This is why I want to help educate hearing people on what our role should be to be inclusive of deaf and hard of hearing people in daily life. We have the upper hand in our current mainstream society, but we can't silence or ignore our deaf and hard of hearing peers. This disconnect between the communities leads hearing people to believe that deaf people aren't capable of doing the things that hearing people are. And that simply just isn't true. Deafness isn't an impairment. Impaired implies that there's something needing to be fixed, that there's something wrong. But in fact, there's nothing wrong with a deaf or hard of hearing person. They are just as capable as we are, they just do things a little differently. So why is it that when a hearing person and a deaf person come in contact, the deaf person is almost always at fault for the inability to communicate? Why are they forced to compensate for us, for our lack of knowledge and ability to communicate with them? Well, this is just something that deaf and hard of hearing people have to deal with every day, and it often goes unnoticed by hearing people. So throughout this past semester and year, I've learned so much about deaf culture and the history of it. And a lot of advancements have been made in this past year in deaf culture and bringing the hearing communities, or the hearing community and deaf community together. TV shows like Switched at Birth on ABC Family includes deaf and hard of hearing actors in a storyline that includes deaf characters. And this has really opened, what are you doing? Stop it. Whatever. This has opened the way to creating more roles for deaf and hard of hearing actors. Okay. Niall DeMarco, who just won America's Next Top Model, is the first deaf contestant to win. And throughout the entire show, he educated the audience, the viewers of the show, and his fellow contestants about deaf and hard of hearing culture. And the revival of Spring Awakening by Deaf West Theatre Company on Broadway uses entirely ASL alongside spoken English and sung English. And this makes theater accessible, makes live theater accessible to deaf audiences while also immersing hearing audiences into ASL and deaf culture. Yeah. It's been a wildly eventful past year in deaf culture, and things are continuing to innovate and change. But just think, a little over 100 years ago, at the Milan Conference, oral means of communication were deemed superior to manual forms of communication. This means that deaf people were forced or expected to learn how to talk, even though it's really hard to learn how to talk when you can't hear. And means of sign language, or the use of sign language was their native language, and it worked for them, and it was the easiest. But hearing people didn't know how to communicate with them, so deaf people were forced to learn how to talk, and weren't allowed to use sign language in schools, so therefore they were deemed uneducatable. That's the word. They weren't allowed to be educated because they couldn't hear, so no one gave them a chance. And now that was 100 years ago, and obviously so much has changed, and so much is continuing to innovate and become more. So this is Niall DeMarco saying, if I could change my life and have it any other way, I would never change anything about who I am, including his deafness, because his deafness doesn't define who he is. It's a factor about him. It's pretty important. I don't think it should be brushed aside, but he's saying that it doesn't make him disabled. He's capable of doing everything that we are, and his goal is to change the world's perspective on deafness, that it's not a disability, but in fact a culture in and of itself. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Seth. Next up.